All right, kids, welcome back. So we are just starting Unit 2, Population and Migration Patterns and Processes. Last class period, we started this note section, so we're going to keep working on it. We already did these slides in class together, so this is where we're going to begin today, with major population clusters. Around the world, there are 5 major population clusters. Can you identify any of them? Take a look at the black markers and the red markers and see if you can identify any of those. Go ahead and pause and hit play when you're ready. All right, let's check your answers. So we have first in China. Some of you might have said that one for sure. Well done. The other one that you probably identified was in India. Again, well done. This section right here in Europe, if you said Europe, that is one. And then we have the Philippines and this portion of Southeast Asia. Then a combined population cluster. This is the 5th major population cluster. It's kind of these 3 combined would be here in Brazil, here in Africa, and then the east coast of the United States. So we're going to talk about each of these different locations, and I'm going to kind of give you a close-up look of what some of these communities look like, why some of them have such high populations, and of course, where they're located. We'll go back and forth to this map each time, and you'll see the different arrows indicating which location we're referring to at that time. So we have East Asia. 25% of the world's population is located here. So the majority of them are going to be living in coastal areas. Think real quick, pause, and think why they are coastal. Pause the video and hit play when you're ready to resume. All right, if you were thinking access to food, that's definitely a correct answer. And a more important answer, though, is the fact that they really wanted to be involved with trade with other communities. Waterways are incredibly important for communities to reach each other. The idea of having things readily available through internet is a very, very new idea. For hundreds and thousands of years, people have been only accessing each other either on foot or through water, ships, traveling. That's how the majority of them have been reaching each other for generations. Clearly, if they are along a river, that is obviously an exception. One example of this is going to be the Yangtze River or the Ganges River in India. Population is mostly rural, okay? So they do have high rates of urbanization, like this cityscape here and clearly here, but for the majority of the people that live there, they really are living in more rural locations. They are primarily involved in agriculture and farming. Okay, and that's this location here that we were just referring to. Okay, this is where we were looking. Okay, the next slide. Southeast Asia. So this is the 4th largest population cluster. I'm sorry, this is the place we're talking about now. There's roughly 600 million people that live here. We're talking about major cities like Singapore. We're talking about the state of the Philippines, through portions of mainland Asia, and then of course Indonesia. It includes Java as well, and Jakarta, Papua New Guinea, which is identified right here, and a lot of this is referred to as Indochina. That's another place. It's kind of one of those regional phrases, kind of like we use the South. Indochina also is referred to as that. Again, these guys are going to be really rural and not going to have a lot of major cities, but of course there are still some functioning cities, just like everywhere. With a population of 600 million people, it's definitely safe to assume that they're clearly going to have some major cities within those communities. But again, the majority of the population lives outside of these bustling cities. Okay, now we're going to be looking at China. Okay, so South Asia. Again, these guys are going to be primarily coastal, and if you look at this map right here, you can clearly see that it's definitely close coastal. If you can remember, pause the video and see if you can remember what major landform is right here that causes people not to live here. It was on your map test. If you said the Gobi Desert, you would be correct. Obviously, they have large densities along the Indus River Valley and the Ganges River. They have less population controls than in East Asian countries. This is a very, very typical scene of something that you would see in one of these communities. They are vertical living. You can see that these are high-rise buildings. Take a look at the infrastructure. I just think this picture is fascinating. If you look really closely at all of these wires, essentially, that kind of look like ropes, they are not ropes, they are wires, and this is their electrical system. It's very unregulated. They have consistent power outages and blackouts among their community on a daily basis. It's not like what we have here, where we have a Utah Power Company or the Rocky Mountain Power Company that services a few different regions, and it's highly regulated, where you have people that would come out and service the lines, add new power to new existing businesses or new homes. These people are essentially kind of doing this all on their own, tapping into their major power. So clearly they have a problem with their carrying capacity here, because they have such a huge population. They don't have as many population controls either, and places like India and Bangladesh are growing faster than any other place. Currently, China has the largest population between India and China, but India is set to outpace them in the coming years and take that #1 place for having the highest rate of population density. Okay, and that's the location there that we're referring to. And you can really see that most of India is very, very densely populated. But you get really, really close up here into Nepal. Again, I'm just using the key right here to show me where the most dense locations are. Okay, now we're going to be talking about Europe. Europe is highly urbanized, unlike the Asian countries or locations we've been talking about, where the majority of their population lives in rural communities. Europe is super urbanized. 75 to 90% of the population of Europe actually live in a city. Let's see if you guys can figure out where this is. Does anybody recognize this one? If you actually are watching this video and you've made it to this point in the video, I am going to be giving you a Cub Pride card if you can come and identify this city based on this image where it is. Okay, I will give you a Cub Pride card. You just need to come and tell me the name of the city. I will not be announcing this to the class, so hopefully this will give me an idea of who is paying attention to these videos. The most highly densely populated, except for the northern countries. So let's go to the map and I'll show you what I'm referring to. So we're talking about this is most of Europe here. Okay, and you can really see that they've got lots of these darker shaded areas all throughout the majority of most countries. However, take a look up here at Scandinavia. Clearly, they do not have nearly as many people. So that's what we're referring to when we say, except for the northern countries, they're definitely less populated. And I'm going to ask you, why do you think that is? Pause the video and then come back. All right, if you said that you think climate or anything having to do with climate is the answer, you are absolutely correct. You're definitely correct. Also, they're further away from places that were populated first, so naturally their population is going to grow at a slower rate. Europe's population distribution is more closely tied to resources and manufacturing. You'll notice that this has heavy ties to the Industrial Revolution, for example, where people were moving to the locations where they were finding things like coal or iron ore within the soil as a natural resource. The factories were built very close to those natural resources. They were also originally powered by steam, therefore they needed access to some type of water, and people flooded into these locations. They just flooded into these locations. And because there were really no protections for workers, people were consistently getting hurt or consistently getting sick or being overworked to the point that they couldn't return to work. And there were always people lined up to take those job positions. Okay, now we're going to talk about North America. So this does include the United States, obviously. Unlike Europe, though, North America has large areas of very sparsely populated regions. What does that mean, sparsely? Think to yourself and pause. All right, if you thought sparsely means little or something like less or not very much, you're correct. So you can take a look at this image right here. I went backwards instead of forward. You can see clearly through here, the United States definitely has some locations that are definitely not populated very densely. You can even see through the Midwest that the numbers are definitely a lot lighter shading. I mean, comparing that to India and China, where so much of theirs are 250 to 999, the US on average is probably closer to 25 to 249. We are highly urbanized around the east and west coasts, which makes sense because, again, most populations are coastal. And because we are a nation of immigrants, it would make sense that those locations should have filled in first, which is exactly what they did. Think of how the 13 colonies were founded first. It wasn't like they came to the East Coast and said, no, we're not going to settle here, let's go as far as we can. Inward, they settled the very first locations that they could, and they still had terrific access to waterways like what you can see in this image here. This is the island of Manhattan right here. You can see the Brooklyn Bridge. So this is a picture of New York. We have what's also referred to as a megalopolis. We'll talk a lot more about this towards the end of the year, but it's basically a location on Earth where major cities are so close together that it's almost like there's not a separation point between them. And really, the United States East Coast has one of the largest megalopolises on Earth, and arguably the only. You basically would go from Washington, D.C. through Boston. So that would include New York, that would include Baltimore, that would include what else? Washington, D.C., Boston, Baltimore, and that entire seaboard right through there. And even from aerial images, you can just see where there's just small little gaps in between those cities, but for the most part, from the air, it really does look like they're really connected to each other. Okay, and that's where we were talking about here. All right, South America. Now we're talking, I know, look at that picture, isn't it crazy? I think a lot of people are shocked to see that places like Brazil, who many of us kind of think of as a little bit less developed, they really do have some massive cities. Certainly anything larger than what you would be familiar with here in Utah. They are mostly concentrated along the periphery of the continent, meaning the exterior. The interior is primarily involved in agriculture, and they are rapidly developing these major cities. So we're talking about the periphery here. And then if you look here, it really is, again, very coastal. There's a large landmass here that makes it so it's very difficult for people to survive here. What is that landmass here? Pause and think. All right, if you said the Amazon, you would be correct. So places like Brazil and some of these less developed states that are becoming more developed, we call these a NICs because they're newly industrialized countries. They're growing at a very fast rate, and they are having a struggle with making sure that they keep up with infrastructure like hospitals, cities, sewer, water, those type of things. But go ahead and use this information to help you fill out that worksheet that was given to you guys yesterday in class, where you guys had to identify information from the 5 major clusters. Good luck.